As I settled into my morning coffee, thinking about the day ahead, Catherine approached with a spark in her eye. "Jack," she began, her tone just shy of mischievous, "how about we throw a party for your birthday? Something different." I didn't need to ask for specifics. She was good at keeping surprises, and part of me liked the idea of leaving it all in her hands. The last birthday party she'd planned for me was simple but memorable, a small gathering of friends, good food, and plenty of laughter. This time, however, something about her energy was intense. She emphasized it would be themed, but refused to reveal the theme. "Just be ready for something unexpected," she teased. The days leading up to the event, she buzzed around the house, adding little decorations here and there, dropping hints and then dodging my questions with a grin. On the surface, everything seemed light-hearted. But I noticed moments, fleeting but sharp, where she'd pause and look at me with an odd expression, something I couldn't quite read. It was almost as if there was a layer to her gaze that didn't belong in the context of a birthday party. Finally, the day of the party arrived. Catherine spent the morning preparing, asking me to stay out of the main living area until everything was set. I chuckled, indulging her request, more curious than ever. The house began to fill with the sounds of laughter and greetings as our friends arrived. Catherine's laughter echoed through the house, filling it with life. Yet, amid all the joy, I couldn't shake an odd feeling creeping into the edges of my mind. I brushed it off as nerves or perhaps anticipation. Catherine had truly outdone herself with the secrecy surrounding this. When she finally came to get me, her face was lit with excitement. "All right, birthday boy," she said, taking my hand and leading me down the hallway. "Are you ready?" "Absolutely," I replied, caught up in her excitement. The living room had been transformed into a lavishly decorated scene from what looked like a masquerade or a Venetian ball. Catherine had provided masks for all the guests, elaborate and mysterious, with intricate designs. Everyone was dressed to match the theme, and as I slipped on the mask Catherine handed me, I felt a strange surge of thrill mixed with tension. I recognized our friends, or at least their voices and body language, but the masks added a layer of anonymity that made everything feel surreal. As the evening unfolded, Catherine seemed to vanish and reappear, never staying in one spot for too long. She was the perfect hostess, laughing and mingling, but I noticed that she'd often disappear down the hallway leading to the more private parts of the house. Each time, she'd come back with a little more glow, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright. I tried to ignore it, to keep myself focused on enjoying the night. But every time she walked off, I felt my curiosity and unease grow. Eventually, I couldn't hold back. I decided to follow her discreetly, weaving my way through the crowd of friends who were too engrossed in the party to notice. I watched as she ducked into a guest bedroom near the back of the house, closing the door behind her. I approached quietly, my heart pounding. Something about the secrecy of it, the masks, and the strange sense of distance between us all night made me uneasy. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door just a crack, enough to see inside. Catherine was standing there, leaning into a conversation with a man whose back was to me. I couldn't see his face, but from the way they stood, their bodies close, leaning towards each other in a way that was far more than friendly, my stomach twisted. She laughed at something he said, reaching out to touch his arm, a gesture far more intimate than I'd ever seen her share with anyone but me. Feeling a surge of jealousy and confusion, I quietly pulled the door shut and retreated. The rest of the night passed in a blur, every laugh and cheer ringing hollow in my ears as I tried to make sense of what I'd seen. It could have been harmless, just a private conversation, but something in my gut told me there was more to it than that. After closing the door, I could still feel the warmth of the handle against my palm, a stark contrast to the coldness settling in my gut. I was reeling from the strange, almost intimate scene I had witnessed between Catherine and that stranger. Needing to clear my head, I turned back down the hallway and slipped into my study. I grabbed a glass and poured a generous helping of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling as I tried to steady my hands. As the warmth of the whiskey hit my throat, I leaned back, trying to convince myself that I was overthinking things. Maybe it was all harmless, just a laugh between friends. Catherine was social, the life of the party, she'd been that way since the day we met. But the more I tried to reason it away, the tighter the knot in my chest became. That look in her eyes, that subtle lean toward him, it was hard to ignore. I threw back another glass, hoping the warmth would burn away the unease creeping up inside me. As the party wound down, the laughter and chatter faded, and our friends filed out into the night with the lingering glow of festivities clinging to them. I managed a few goodbyes, wearing a smile that felt more forced than genuine, though I doubt anyone noticed. Catherine was her usual radiant self, hugging our friends, laughing brightly. Her eyes sparkled, and for a moment, I let myself believe I was being ridiculous, that I was misinterpreting something innocent. But then, as I poured myself a final glass and leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to shake off the lingering doubts, I felt her presence behind me. "Hey," she said, her voice a little too casual, like she'd been anticipating this moment all night. "Hey," I replied, taking a sip, careful to keep my expression neutral. She closed the distance between us, sliding her arm around my waist. "I have one more surprise for you," she said, her voice soft, almost playful. She tilted her head toward the hallway leading back to our bedroom, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Maybe this was a surprise she'd planned, a gift that was just for us. I followed her, feeling a strange mixture of apprehension and anticipation swirling in my chest. Once we reached the bedroom, she stopped just inside the doorway, and I watched as her expression shifted, taking on a hint of something mischievous, something I couldn't quite place. "Wait here," she instructed, her voice almost a purr as she moved toward the closet. She opened the door, rifling through a few things, before turning back to me with something small and folded in her hand. "Here's your other gift," she said, holding it out to me with a smile that was different. Not the warm, familiar smile I knew so well, but something cooler, a little more distant, almost like she was daring me. I looked down at the item in her hand, feeling a pang of confusion as I took it. Unfolding the fabric, I realized it was some kind of costume, a strange, satirical caricature of a jester's outfit, complete with a headpiece that resembled horns. My stomach twisted as I stared down at it, understanding dawning slowly, horribly. She watched me, her eyes gleaming with something between amusement and challenge. "I thought it would be fun," she said, her voice light, her gaze unwavering. "After all, you've been a very good sport tonight." I couldn't form words, my throat had gone dry. What is this?" I finally managed, holding the costume up, the absurdity of it making my skin crawl. The realization settled over me like a cold shroud. This wasn't a joke. The costume, the party, her disappearing acts, it was all connected. Catherine stepped closer, trailing her fingers along my arm. "Oh, come on, Jack," she said, her tone almost teasing. "I thought you'd be up for a little adventure. Something to spice things up." Spice things up? My voice was barely above a whisper, my mind struggling to keep up with the implications of her words. I felt my pulse hammering in my temples as I looked down at the costume, then back at her, a cold realization dawning. She had orchestrated this entire night, this party, this masquerade, for a reason I hadn't seen coming. I'd been blind, lost in the celebration, the excitement of it all, while she'd been playing some game I didn't even understand. "You can't be serious," I finally said, my voice strained, almost unrecognizable to my own ears. Her gaze didn't waver, in fact, it seemed to sharpen, a flash of impatience crossing her face. "Jack," she replied, her tone shifting, more direct now. "You're always talking about loyalty, about trust. I thought you'd appreciate the chance to prove it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I'd loved, trusted, spent my life with, was standing here, practically daring me to participate in this twisted scenario she'd crafted. My heart felt heavy, the weight of betrayal settling over me in waves. The whiskey, the warmth I'd tried to rely on to calm my nerves, now churned uneasily in my stomach. "This is some kind of game to you, isn't it?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper, the shock quickly giving way to a simmering anger. She tilted her head, an almost bored expression crossing her face. "Oh, come on, Jack. It's just a costume. It's just fun. You're taking this far too seriously. Far too seriously? I stared at her, the woman I'd thought I knew, seeing her now through a lens that felt foreign, alien. My mind raced, each memory, each laugh, each moment we'd shared, suddenly tinged with a sense of something hidden, something dark. You've changed, I managed, shaking my head, feeling as though I was looking at a stranger. This isn't us. She shrugged, an indifferent flick of her shoulder that stung like a slap. Maybe I've just realized there's more to life than routine, she said, her voice laced with an undertone that cut deep. And tonight was about giving you the chance to see that too. I took a shaky breath, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on me, the casualness of her tone underscoring the distance that had somehow grown between us. I didn't know what to say, what to feel, as I stood there holding the ridiculous costume she thrust into my hands. "Happy birthday, Jack," she said, a smirk playing at the corner of her lips, as if she knew exactly how this would unravel me. But instead of saying anything more, I simply dropped the costume to the floor, turned, and left the room. I didn't know where I was going, or what I would do next, but one thing was certain, everything had changed in that one moment. The life I thought I knew had just slipped away, leaving nothing but the harsh sting of betrayal and the hollow echo of laughter that wasn't mine. I stood in the hallway, my hands still shaking, my heart racing with the betrayal I couldn't quite believe. I thought about just walking out of the house, vanishing into the night, and leaving this entire nightmare behind me. But Catherine's voice broke through my daze, calling after me, echoing down the hallway with a strange, honeyed tone. "Oh, Jack, where are you going?" she teased, as if this were all some light-hearted prank. I turned back, barely able to meet her gaze, the costume lying like a discarded, absurd joke on the floor between us. Her lips curved into a smirk, and she cocked her head, the mask of innocence slipping completely. "We're waiting for you in a secret room on the second floor," she said smoothly, her voice taking on a silky tone that was both chilling and taunting. "This will be your main gift." She trailed off, letting the words linger in the air, thick with implications I couldn't quite grasp. "Don't forget to wear a suit, my darling." Those last words felt like a punch to the gut. She said them with an easy familiarity, as if we hadn't just stepped over a line I never imagined existed in our marriage. My mind spun as her words hung in the air. They weren't just some half-hearted joke, there was intent in them, an anticipation that unsettled me to my core. I stumbled back to my study, feeling like I was doused with boiling water, trying to shake off the dread pooling in my stomach. Instinctively, my hand reached for the drawer where I kept an old pack of cigarettes. I hadn't smoked in years, but tonight felt like the kind of night that called for something to calm the nerves. With fumbling fingers, I lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply as the acrid smoke filled my lungs, cutting through the fog of disbelief clouding my mind. I exhaled slowly, feeling a dull, temporary calm settling over me, but my mind raced. Was this all some twisted game? Was I simply reading too much into it? After all, she said it was a surprise, a gift. Maybe, just maybe, if I went upstairs and confronted her, things would clear up. I could laugh this off, tell myself it was nothing but a poorly thought-out joke. I crushed the cigarette in the ashtray, exhaling one last shaky breath as I resolved to find out. Returning to the bedroom, I forced myself to pull on a suit, fumbling with the buttons as my hands shook. It was strange, dressing up for what felt like a betrayal, as if I were preparing myself for a showdown rather than an intimate evening. But there was a part of me that couldn't walk away, a part that needed answers, even if I dreaded what I might find. I stepped out of the bedroom and made my way up the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The house was silent, with only the faintest murmur of voices carrying from somewhere beyond, adding to the strange, surreal atmosphere. The second floor had been mostly off-limits during the party. Catherine had instructed everyone to stay downstairs. But now, as I moved down the darkened hallway, I noticed a faint light spilling from beneath a closed door at the far end. I paused just outside the door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. I could hear voices, low and indistinct, followed by Catherine's laugh. It was a sound that once brought me comfort, a familiar warmth, but tonight it sent a shiver down my spine. Summoning what little courage I had left, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit by a few strategically placed lamps, casting an eerie, intimate glow across the scene. Inside, a handful of people stood in various states of conversation, their faces partially obscured by the Venetian masks from earlier. Catherine stood in the center, her hand resting on the arm of the man I'd seen her with earlier. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, but it wasn't the warmth of recognition or love that I'd hoped to see, it was something darker, more calculated. "Ah, there you are," she exclaimed, her voice bright, yet laced with something I couldn't quite identify. She motioned to the people around us. "Everyone, this is the birthday boy." They all turned toward me, murmuring greetings and raising their glasses, but their smiles were strange, as if they were in on a joke that I wasn't. I felt a wave of discomfort sweep over me, and for a moment, I considered turning and walking right out. But Catherine closed the distance between us, slipping her arm through mine, keeping me anchored in place. "Don't be shy, Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the low hum of conversation. "We've all been waiting for you." "Catherine, what is this?" I asked, my voice low, struggling to keep the unease out of it. She just smiled, her fingers tracing lazy circles along my arm. "It's your gift," she said softly, her eyes gleaming with that same unsettling intensity. "A night you'll never forget." My throat tightened as she gestured to the man beside her. "Jack, this is Adrian. He's going to be joining us tonight, if you're up for it." The words hit me like a sledgehammer, the implication sinking in, robbing me of breath. I looked between them, feeling as though the ground had fallen out from beneath me. I don't understand," I managed, my voice barely more than a whisper. Catherine tilted her head, giving me a look that was both patient and slightly condescending. "Jack, tonight isn't about understanding. It's about experiencing." She leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear. "We wanted to try something new. To open a door to something exciting. And you said you trusted me." I was frozen, caught in a whirlpool of emotions I couldn't untangle. Her words, her touch, the presence of this stranger, it was all surreal, twisting everything I thought I knew about our relationship. I wanted to ask if she was serious, if this was some sick prank, but the way she looked at me, as if daring me to react, told me everything I needed to know. Adrian, the man beside her, took a step forward, his gaze steady, unperturbed. "It's all in good fun," he said, his voice calm, reassuring. But his presence only intensified the claustrophobic feeling creeping up inside me. Catherine squeezed my arm, her smile unwavering. "Go on, Jack. Embrace the moment. You only turn 40 once, right?" I wanted to scream, to lash out, to do anything but stand there, paralyzed, caught in the web of Catherine's strange game. But as her hand lingered on my arm, as her eyes held mine, I felt a strange compulsion to stay, to see this twisted evening through to its end. I forced a weak smile, nodding, though my insides churned with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and confusion. "Sure, let's do this," I said, barely recognizing the sound of my own voice. The room seemed to close in around me, the walls pressing closer as Catherine led me further into the group, their eyes watching, knowing. I was led to a large, ornate chair set against the far wall of the room, something between an armchair and a throne, lavishly padded and elevated on a small platform. The people in the room moved around me, casting glances my way, their eyes hidden behind their masks, leaving only their expressions and the strange energy in their movements to clue me in. Everything felt dreamlike, as if I were watching it all through a filter, somehow present yet distanced from what was happening. "Go on, Jack," Catherine whispered, guiding me toward the throne-like chair. Her hand lingered on my arm as she gestured for me to sit. "Relax. Just enjoy what you're seeing." I lowered myself into the seat, still trying to make sense of it all, my mind racing with questions and doubts. But the room was dimly lit, the shadows and soft lights creating an ambience that felt surreal, almost hypnotic. Soft music began to play, a melody so smooth it seemed to melt into the walls, making everything feel slower, more intense. I sank deeper into the chair, feeling the weight of the room pressing in on me as I tried to keep my breathing steady. Catherine turned back to Adrian, her eyes gleaming with a boldness I'd never seen before. Without a word, she closed the distance between them, slipping her arms around his neck, pulling him close. She glanced at me, a faint smile tugging at her lips as she leaned in, brushing her lips against Adrian's with a deliberate, tantalizing slowness. I felt my pulse quicken, a rush of blood pounding in my ears as I watched her, half expecting her to stop, to glance back at me and laugh, revealing it all as some elaborate joke. But she didn't stop. Instead, she deepened the kiss, her fingers tracing along his back, her body pressing against his in a way that made my stomach twist. Adrian responded, his hands finding her waist, moving with a confidence that hinted at a familiarity I didn't want to acknowledge. They seemed lost in each other, moving with a rhythm that felt intimate, practiced. It was a scene I couldn't tear my eyes from, even as my mind screamed at me to look away, to shut out what was unfolding before me. The music played on, soft and mesmerizing, mingling with the low murmurs and whispered breaths that filled the room. Catherine and Adrian's touches grew bolder, more intimate, and I could feel the heat rise in the room, each movement sending a shock of discomfort and something else through me. I didn't want to admit it, but as I sat there, unable to move, something in me stirred. My heart raced, my skin prickling with a mix of jealousy, confusion, and an undeniable, unwanted fascination. They moved as if I weren't even there, hands exploring, lips pressing, their silhouettes merging in the dim light. I felt trapped, held by an invisible force, bound to the chair by the weight of my own emotions, each one colliding with the next, until I couldn't tell where one feeling ended and another began. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Catherine pulled back from Adrian, her breathing quickened, her eyes dark with the thrill of whatever this was. She turned to me, a smile curving on her lips as she slowly, deliberately walked over, her gaze fixed on me with an intensity that left me feeling both vulnerable and strangely exhilarated. She reached out, her hand finding my shoulder, fingers trailing down my arm as she leaned close, her scent, warm and familiar, washing over me. "Did you enjoy that, Jack?" she whispered, her voice a low, intimate murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. She didn't wait for my answer. Instead, she began to touch me, her hands gentle but insistent, moving over my shoulders, down my chest, her touch light yet electrifying. I felt a dizzying rush, my body reacting before my mind could catch up, the lines between anger, confusion, and desire blurring into something I couldn't define. Catherine's fingers moved slowly, tracing the contours of my face, my neck, each touch leaving a trail of warmth that made me feel almost detached from reality, like I was floating in a world suspended between dream and waking. I felt high, as if the room itself had transformed, everything softening into a haze of sensation, each touch, each breath amplifying the strange intensity of the moment. As Catherine's hands trailed down my chest, an intense mixture of emotions churned inside me, confusion, desire, betrayal, and a desperate yearning to bring things back to the way they once were. The surreal scene around us, the dim lights, the masked faces watching with curious amusement, all of it felt like some twisted theater where I was the unprepared lead in an unfamiliar role. I looked into Catherine's eyes, trying to find a trace of the woman I had married, the woman who used to make me feel like the luckiest man alive. Her gaze held an allure that was both thrilling and unsettling, a boldness that felt foreign yet intoxicating. In that moment, I couldn't let this go on. I couldn't stand the idea of sharing her, of her attention being divided between me and these strangers, no matter what strange fantasy she was trying to fulfill tonight. "Catherine," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, barely audible over the soft hum of the music. I took her hands in mine, pulling her close, letting the distance and coldness of the last few hours melt away, if only for a moment. "I have one last wish for my birthday." She tilted her head, her eyes flickering with curiosity. "Anything, Jack," she murmured, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her lips, but there was still a gleam of challenge there, as if she were daring me to ask. "Let everyone leave now," I said, my voice stronger, more resolute. I felt a wave of calm settle over me, the decision lifting a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I just want it to be the two of us. I paused, holding her gaze, my words quiet but filled with a raw sincerity I couldn't hide. "I want to make love with you, Catherine. Just us." The room seemed to fall silent, the murmur of voices and the background music fading away, leaving only the intense look between us. Catherine's smile faltered, and for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, as though my words had touched something deeper, something she hadn't expected. "Jack," she began, her voice soft, a hint of hesitation in her tone. But I didn't let her finish. I squeezed her hands, a silent plea, letting her know that I needed this, that we needed this, away from the prying eyes and expectations of everyone else in the room. The thrill of the unknown, the excitement of her surprise, had vanished, replaced by a raw, aching need to reconnect, to find some semblance of the love that had brought us together. She looked around the room, a silent, almost imperceptible nod signaling to the guests, who began to shift, murmuring quietly to each other as they moved toward the door, one by one. There was no fanfare, no dramatic exit, they simply filed out, leaving behind an empty room bathed in soft, ambient light. The last of them closed the door behind them, leaving just the two of us standing in the silent, dimly lit space. Catherine's gaze returned to me, and for the first time all night, I saw something familiar in her eyes, a softness, an openness that felt like the woman I'd known, the woman I'd shared my life with. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around my neck, her face inches from mine, her breath warm against my cheek. "Is this what you wanted, Jack?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath, her eyes searching mine. I nodded, unable to find the words, my heart pounding as I pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. There were no masks now, no strangers watching, no elaborate games. It was just us, two people with a lifetime of shared memories and love, trying to find each other again. Slowly, I leaned in, my lips brushing against hers, tentative at first, as if rediscovering a familiar sensation. Her hand slid up to cradle my face, and she returned the kiss with a tenderness that felt like a balm, soothing the bruises left by the evening's strange events. The world outside faded, the walls of the room dissolving into nothing as our kiss deepened, our bodies pressing together, each touch a reminder of the connection we'd almost lost. The dim lights cast soft shadows around us, illuminating the room with a warm glow as we moved together, shedding the layers of confusion and hurt, finding solace in each other. I let myself get lost in her, in the familiarity of her scent, the warmth of her skin, the way her breath hitched as I held her close, whispering words of love and promises to her in a way I hadn't in far too long. It felt as though time had stopped, as if we were suspended in a moment that existed outside of everything that had come before, and everything that might come after. Here, with her, I felt whole, a renewed promise between us, a quiet understanding as we found each other again in the stillness of that private, intimate space. For that night, nothing else mattered, not the shadows of doubt, nor the strange twists of the evening. Just her and me, wrapped up in each other, rediscovering the love that had once been ours, rekindled in the silence of a room that, for that moment, was ours alone. The next day, I thought that maybe such parties should be organized more often, because it was such a whirlwind of emotions and Catherine's attitude towards me became much warmer. Even though my jealousy mixed with anger was on the verge of unrealistic, the passion in bed afterwards was worth it. She opened new boundaries in me and I am very happy about that.